Before we dive into this wild ride, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? I love hearing just how far these Karen tales of chaos and karma can travel. The morning sun had barely risen above the rooftops when the shouting started. I was halfway through a cup of coffee, enjoying the rare silence of our street, when Amber's voice ripped through the air like a fire alarm. She was standing in her driveway, long brown hair flailing around her shoulders, her heavy frame stuffed into that same black floral outfit I'd seen her wear more times than I cared to count. In one hand, she clutched a Wi-Fi router like it was evidence in a murder trial, and in the other, she waved her phone around, face twisted with fury. He changed the password. "This is illegal," she screeched, spit flying. Her words so shrill even the birds scattered from the trees. Her sister, Amy, wasn't far behind. Slightly shorter, but built the same. Her black floral dress clung to her as she stomped across the lawn. Amy had her own brand of drama. She'd hooked her fist in a younger neighbor's hair, a woman in a white summer dress who had the misfortune of jogging past their house at the wrong time. Amy yanked her around like she was making a point to the entire block. "This is what happens when people mess with community resources," Amy shouted, dragging the poor woman a few steps before letting her stumble away in shock. "He broke our entire system. Nothing works." Neighbors began stepping out onto porches. Phones appeared, discreet at first, then bold. The spectacle was too much to ignore. I leaned on my car parked in the driveway and took another slow sip of coffee. On the outside, I looked calm. Inside, I was boiling. Amber and Amy had finally lost it. They weren't just embarrassing themselves. They were trying to drag me through the mud in front of everyone. And all because I dared to do one simple thing: secure my own internet. Amber spotted me then, her eyes lighting up with a kind of anger that made people flinch. She charged across the grass, router clutched tight like she was going to throw it at me. "You think you can get away with this?" she bellowed. "You think you can cut off someone's connection to the world? This is cybercrime." Amy stormed up beside her, breathing heavy from the hair-dragging performance. "Our smart fridge won't even open," she cried, voice breaking with theatrical devastation. "Our thermostat is frozen. Our lights won't respond. Do you know what you've done to our lives?" The crowd of neighbors stifled laughter. I saw Mrs. Chong across the street cover her mouth with both hands. Two teenagers leaned against a mailbox, recording the entire meltdown. I lowered my mug and finally spoke, my tone cool. "I changed the password to my Wi-Fi. That's all I did. You know, the thing I pay for every month? The one that doesn't have your names on the bill." Amber's jaw dropped like I'd cursed her family line. "You admit it," she gasped, spinning around toward the gathering audience. "He admits it. He cut us off. He's abusing the system." Amy added, "We have rights. Rights to shared community utilities. This affects everyone." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Your rights stop where my bank account starts." The jogger Amy had grabbed earlier rubbed her scalp and muttered, "You two are insane," before retreating down the sidewalk. For months, I'd put up with these women. When they moved in a year ago, they treated the neighborhood like their kingdom. Borrowed lawnmowers without asking. Blasted music at midnight. Shoved trash bags into other people's bins when theirs overflowed. Small things at first, annoyances you try to ignore because you want to keep the peace. But then came the Wi-Fi. It started innocently enough. I caught Amber one day, standing on my porch, phone in hand, asking if she could just hop on my network real quick until her provider got things set up. I was caught off guard, and against my better judgment, I gave her the password. A week later, Amy accidentally locked herself out of her own plan and asked for the same. By the time I realized what was happening, the sisters were fully freeloading, streaming movies, hosting watch parties, and bragging at barbecues about how they never had to pay a cent for internet. I let it slide longer than I should have. I told myself it wasn't worth the confrontation. But every time they mocked me, every time they laughed about how some people don't even notice when they're being used, I felt that knob anger tighten. And when I saw my own Netflix account playing in their living room through their window one night, I snapped. So I did what any reasonable adult would do. I changed the password. Now here we were in broad daylight, with Amber shrieking about cybercrime and Amy declaring my actions an assault on their way of life. "You don't get it," Amber barked, stepping closer until I could smell the acrid perfume she'd practically bathed in. "We need that connection. Everything in our house is online. You broke it. You owe us." I tilted my head. "I owe you? For stealing from me?" Amy jabbed a finger toward my chest. "You can't hoard resources in a neighborhood like this. It's selfish. It's disgusting. We're calling the HOA. We're calling the police. We'll tell everyone what kind of man you really are." Her words landed with a dull thud. They didn't scare me, but the arrogance behind them made my blood boil. This wasn't just entitlement. This was obsession. Around us, the crowd thickened. More phones recording. More whispers. I knew exactly what the sisters were doing, trying to flip the narrative before I could. They'd always been loud enough, dramatic enough, manipulative enough to make people second-guess themselves. But not this time. Not anymore. I set my coffee down on the hood of my car and crossed my arms. "Go ahead," I said, keeping my voice even. "Call whoever you want. But you're not getting back on my Wi-Fi. Ever." Amber's face went red, blotches spreading across her cheeks. She raised the router above her head like she was about to smash it. Amy hissed something in her ear, too low for me to catch, and Amber froze, router still trembling in her grip. The silence stretched just long enough for the tension to thicken. I could hear the buzz of a bee near my ear, the distant whine of a lawnmower down the street, even my own heartbeat hammering in my chest. Then Amber lowered the router slowly, her lips curling into a cold smile. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low but carrying. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started." Amy stepped forward, eyes glittering with spite. "You'll regret crossing us. We always win." They turned together, storming back to their yard, their matching floral dresses swaying like dark banners in the morning light. The crowd began to disperse, murmurs filling the air, but I stayed rooted in place, staring at their retreating backs. Something in their tone told me they weren't bluffing. They'd lost their easy source of entertainment, their free ride, and their fragile pride had taken a hit in front of the entire neighborhood. That made them dangerous. I picked up my coffee again, though it had gone cold, and whispered under my breath, "Let's see what you come up with." The battle lines were drawn, and the sisters weren't going to let this go quietly. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't either. Before we dive deeper into what happened next, let me tell you, one of my absolute favorite stories I've ever shared is linked in the description and on the end screen. It's called "Karen Said People Like You Shouldn't Sit in First Class. Didn't Know I Was the Air Marshal on Board." If you haven't watched it yet, I highly recommend it, because that one was pure karma at 30,000 feet. The following day, the neighborhood didn't wake to birdsong or the whir of sprinklers. It woke to a sign. A massive neon poster board monstrosity stood in Amber and Amy's front yard, anchored to a pair of crooked lawn chairs. Thick black letters screamed across it, "Our neighbor is a Wi-Fi thief." I stared at it from my kitchen window, still groggy from sleep, my coffee not even brewed yet. The audacity was almost impressive. They had twisted the truth into something so absurd, so shameless, it was practically performance art. By mid-morning, the sign had done its job. People slowed their cars as they passed, craning their necks. Pedestrians pulled out their phones, snapping photos. It was a circus, and Amber and Amy were grinning from their porch like they were the ringmasters. I tried ignoring it, but the sisters weren't satisfied with a single spectacle. Their campaign against me spread like a disease. That afternoon, I opened the neighborhood WhatsApp group to find a flood of messages from Amber. She typed in frantic bursts, painting me as some kind of tyrant who had cut off vital services from two vulnerable women. Amy chimed in with exaggerated sob stories. Their fridge locked them out of their food, their lights refused to switch on, their entire smart home system was crippled by cruelty. It would have been comical if it wasn't aimed at me. A few neighbors, the gullible ones, actually responded with sympathy. "That's awful, you should talk to the HOA. He can't just do that, can he?" Others stayed silent, though I could tell from the sarcastic tone of private texts I received that most people weren't buying it. Still, it stung. Their smear campaign wasn't about winning facts. It was about drowning me in noise. By evening, I discovered my trash cans knocked over in the street. 2 nights later, I found faint scratches etched across the side of my car. Nothing catastrophic, just enough to irritate, to remind me they were watching. I had no proof, of course, but I didn't need it. Every act carried their signature, petty, vicious, and wrapped in denial. I decided to be the bigger person. I called the HOA, calmly explained the situation, and requested mediation. But when the meeting came, Amber and Amy arrived with crocodile tears and rehearsed lines. They wept about hostile treatment, spoke of feeling targeted, as single women trying to survive. They waved around their fabricated narrative until the HOA board looked more exhausted than outraged. One board member even muttered that maybe I could just share the password to keep the peace. I left that meeting with clenched fists and a hollow pit in my stomach. If reason couldn't fix this, if even the HOA didn't have the spine to call them out, then peace was never an option. I tried avoidance next. For a week, I ignored their shouting fits, their glares, their attempts to bait me. But the sisters escalated, like children throwing louder tantrums when denied candy. One night, I caught Amy standing outside my window, her phone lifted toward my house, like she was chasing a Wi-Fi signal. Her silhouette in the darkness was eerie, her face half lit by the glow of the screen. When she noticed me staring back, she didn't flinch. She just smiled, slow and unsettling, before slipping back into the shadows. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just freeloading anymore. It was obsession. But obsession came with weakness, and theirs was glaring. I'd listened to their constant bragging, their endless talk about their nightly watch parties. Netflix was their holy ritual. Every evening, without fail, they filled their living room with snacks, dragged friends inside, and streamed until past midnight. It was more than entertainment. It was their identity. Without it, they weren't the center of attention. Without it, their house wasn't the social hub they bragged about. I remembered one evening months earlier, when I had walked past their house and heard my own Netflix account echoing through their open windows. They had been watching some drama series, laughing loud, not even bothering to hide the theft. I'd stood there for a long moment, staring at the glow on their television, realizing my own name was the one paying for it. The insult still burned. That memory solidified the plan. If cutting them off from Wi-Fi had sparked outrage, taking away their Netflix would ignite something far bigger. But I wasn't going to do it quietly. I wanted them to feel it, to choke on it. That night, I sat at my desk, logged into my account, and changed the password. I felt a grim satisfaction, a sharp edge of justice, as I clicked save. Then I went further. I renamed my Wi-Fi network to PAYYOURBLLS _Amber _ and Amy. And just for good measure, I set up a guest network under the name not /_your /_Wi-Fi. When the update processed, I leaned back in my chair and let out a laugh that startled even me. It was petty, yes, but it was also the perfect mirror to their arrogance. They had mocked me for months, bragged about using what wasn't theirs. Now their humiliation was about to be broadcast in the very medium they worshipped, a failed movie night. The next day, whispers drifted around the street. Neighbors had noticed the new Wi-Fi names. A few even texted me privately, sending screenshots and laughing emojis. One message read, "Finally someone gave them what they deserve." Another, "Can't wait to see how they react." It wasn't just my fight anymore. The whole block was pulling up chairs for the show. When dusk fell, I stood at my window and watched as cars pulled up outside the sisters' house. Their friends arrived carrying pizza boxes, soda bottles, bags of chips. The house glowed with anticipation. Through the open blinds, I could see Amber buzzing with energy, clapping her hands, Amy ushering guests toward the couch. It was showtime. But inside, a different kind of show was about to begin. I could picture it vividly, the flicker of the television, the endless loading circle, the frustration mounting as Netflix refused to play. They would scramble, shout, accuse. And then they would notice. They would see the mocking Wi-Fi names glowing on their devices, a neon sign that told the truth. Their free ride was over. I turned away from a window, but not before catching a faint sound on the evening air, the rising voice of Amber, sharp and panicked, echoing through the glass. She was already unraveling. I poured myself a drink and settled into my own couch, a satisfied smile tugging at my lips. The sisters thought they had cornered me with their games, but all they had done was hand me the perfect weapon. The night was young, and their humiliation had only just begun. The first scream echoed across the street before the sun had even set. It was Amber's voice, jagged and raw, cutting through the suburban quiet like glass on pavement. I didn't need to be inside their house to imagine what was happening. I could see the shadows of their guests through the blinds, restless shapes shifting as the television screen refused to cooperate. Netflix was gone, and with it went their control. From my porch, I caught snatches of their meltdown. Amy's shrill wail, Amber's furious pounding on the remote, the frustrated murmurs of friends who had come expecting a movie night and instead found chaos. The sound of canned laughter was missing. The endless loading circle had stolen the show. I had timed everything perfectly. I hadn't just cut them off. I had left them staring directly at my message. 2 glowing Wi-Fi names mocking them with every attempt to reconnect. Payerbills /_Amber/ and Amy. Not /_ your / Wi-Fi. The room must have been boiling with embarrassment, their guests whispering behind smirks, eyes darting between the screen and the sisters' flailing tantrums. The blinds snapped open suddenly, and Amber's face appeared blotchy with rage, eyes darting around like a predator searching for prey. Her gaze swept the street until it landed on me. I raised my glass in a slow, deliberate toast. Her mouth dropped open, then slammed shut in a hard line. She yanked the blinds closed again, but not fast enough to hide the laughter of one of her guests spilling out into the night air. By 9 o'clock, their porch was empty of cars. Their friends had slipped away, their patience worn thin by the spectacle inside. The sisters were left alone, stranded in the very kingdom they thought they ruled, stripped of their audience. The following morning, retaliation came in a new form. A fresh sign appeared, larger than the first, covering nearly the entire fence line. "This neighbor is a hacker," it screamed, painted in red with angry strokes. Below it, a crude drawing of a man at a computer, eyes glowing like a villain in a cartoon. Subtlety had never been their style. I stood in my yard, watering the grass, pretending not to notice as neighbors walked by chuckling. Some stopped to take photos, others shook their heads. The sign wasn't the weapon they thought it was. It was an admission of defeat. Their anger was so loud, so desperate, it had crossed the line from intimidation to comedy. Still, I knew better than to underestimate them. Desperation makes people reckless, and reckless people are dangerous. I documented everything. Screenshots of their public accusations, clips neighbors had recorded of Amber screaming in the street, photos of their signs. Evidence piled up on my laptop like ammunition waiting to be fired. I didn't want to fight, but if they wanted war, I would make sure they were buried under their own mistakes. That weekend, their obsession hit a fever pitch. I was on my porch again when I heard the commotion. Their front door burst open, and both sisters stormed into the yard carrying the router, tangled in cables like a strangled beast. Amber held it high above her head, proclaiming to no one in particular, "He sabotaged this. He hacked our system." Amy followed, clutching her phone, screaming about police reports and FBI investigations. The neighbors gathered again, drawn by the noise, and phones appeared like moths to flame. Cameras captured Amber shaking the router, veins bulging in her neck, while Amy stomped in circles, waving her phone as though summoning invisible agents. I didn't move. I let them perform. Every shout, every dramatic gesture, every baseless accusation became part of the record. And the more they screamed, the clearer it became to everyone else that they weren't victims. They were tyrants unraveling in public. When the police eventually did show up, summoned by the sisters' frantic calls, the scene flipped. The officers stood with practiced calm, taking notes as Amber ranted about cybercrimes and Amy demanded immediate arrests. Then one officer asked a simple question. Whose name is on the internet bill? The silence that followed was beautiful. Amber sputtered, Amy glared, but neither had an answer. The officer turned to me, and I held out a printed copy of my bill with my name in bold across the top. He glanced at it, nodded once, and tucked it into his folder. Then he looked back at the sisters with a blank expression that carried the weight of dismissal. The crowd erupted into whispers and laughter as the officers left without further action. Amber's face collapsed into fury, Amy's into despair. Their performance had failed. But the true climax came later that evening. Clips of the meltdown hit social media, posted by gleeful neighbors who had captured every second. By midnight, the videos were spreading fast, labeled with mocking titles. Wi-Fi Karens strike again. Comments piled up, jokes flying about routers and Netflix. Strangers laughing at their expense. For women who thrived on control, on being the center of attention in their curated little world, the humiliation was unbearable. They had wanted an audience, and now they had won, but it wasn't applauding. It was jeering. The next morning, the signs were gone. The porch sat empty, curtains drawn tight. For the first time in months, the street was quiet, peaceful. The neighborhood exhaled. I sat in my living room, streaming a movie on Netflix under my new private password. The sound filled my house, crisp and uninterrupted, and I let myself enjoy the simple pleasure of owning what was mine. Outside, the sisters stewed in silence, cut off from their stolen comforts, left to face the consequences of their arrogance. It wasn't revenge that tasted sweetest. It was justice. Simple, clean, and undeniable. They had taken from me, mocked me, tried to paint me as the villain. But in the end, their downfall came not from anything I did, but from who they were. Their entitlement was the rope, and they tied the knot themselves. I closed my eyes, letting the movie play, a final thought curling in my mind like smoke. Entitlement has a funny way of crashing. It doesn't explode. It doesn't even shatter. It collapses slowly, under its own weight, until all that's left is silence. And in that silence, I poured myself another drink, smiled, and waited. Because something told me Amber and Amy weren't finished yet. And if they tried again, I'd be ready.